So we're both in frame. Hi, look at that. Look how pro. Oh my God.
So
professional. And this is my first time by myself gizmoing the gizmos. So hi everyone. Thanks for joining us here at the Paloma Media YouTube channel. We are live streaming here. Will you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I am Batya Ungar-Sargon. I am the Deputy Opinion Editor at Newsweek.
And I'm Nancy Rommelmann. You've probably seen me here before with Matt Welch, my usual pod partner, but we're going to be mixing it up a little. We're here tonight with Batya, tomorrow night with Liz Wolfe. And what I would love for you guys to do, if you don't mind, is subscribe. We are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of March. So it's free. Just subscribe. Look, it doesn't cost you anything. So I have been very fortunate enough to be writing for you for the past 2 or 3 weeks. How did we? Oh, I know how. So Batya posted on Twitter, where we all essentially live, that she was the new deputy opinion editor. I'm like, I'm pitching her like this minute, and I did, and you wanted it, and we.
Yeah, but I became aware of you, I think, around your Portland reporting.
Sure.
When it became clear, only through you, that all of the mainstream reporters were essentially running their copy through the lead Antifa protesters. And if they didn't do that, they were kicked out of protests, and Nancy was the only one who caught
I was going to say, did they put it through the deflavorizer? No, but it actually is true that, and some people, I reported on the protests for Reason. You can go over there for 6 months and actually have a big feature in the May issue, kind of a sort of like summing up about like what happened in Portland.
Amazing.
Called The Dream of the 90s Died in Portland, from a riff on the Portlandia thing. Okay, come over here. I want to see your face more.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we're just learning how to do this, guys. So yes, so the media, for the most part, we get a lot of our news through more liberal media. But the problem was, because everybody was so divided in the country and has been under Donald Trump, it was just like our natural proclivities to go to one side or the other. And the two stories that were being told were like more of like a Fox News savages coming to your town, or a MSNBC everyone is peaceful, and if you don't say that, then you're against us. And of course, that's not the story. I don't know why it was so hard for writers to say, it's okay to say most people are peaceful, but like a few of these yahoos are not. But they found it difficult because then you were going to be against Black Lives Matter. And the fact of the matter is, the people that were busting shit up every night in Portland were not Black Lives Matter. I mean, they sloganeered the Black Lives Matter thing because that was like cover. But they're people that want to burn shit down because that's what they know how to do. They don't want to build anything. Anyway, I'm moving my soapbox off to the right now. Okay, so I'm super glad to be writing for you, and I want to do more of it. And so we ran the second piece today. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we've been covering?
Yeah, Nancy's been doing some great writing for us about the implosion at the New York Times. So basically, I think this is like the third or the fourth scandal the Times has had in as many months. Would you say?
I think they really started in July. I think the Tom Cotton piece, when James Bennett and Barry Weiss were, left. I've never really quite understood if James Bennett was fired or if he, resigned under pressure the way that McNeil did. I know Barry Weiss basically just dipped. She's like, I'm out. Though they had been making it uncomfortable there for her for a long time.
My understanding is that something very similar happened to James Bennett as happened to Donald McNeil.
Sure, and quickly.
Yeah,
that's
very quickly. I think the two stories have something else in common. Do you think your viewers know kind of the sort of bare bones of what happened, or should we go
do
it? Well, so the Tom Cotton brouhaha happened in June, I believe it was.
It's June or July, but sure, June. We'll call it June.
After a series of really bad nights, like what Nancy was covering in Portland and Seattle, Tom Cotton, took to Twitter and to Fox News to talk about the Insurrection Act and his belief that the federal government should be sending in troops to quell rioting and looting where local police could not get the cities under control on their own. And the New York Times, which had already run, I believe it was 3 op-eds and an editorial against the Insurrection Act, published an op-ed by him arguing, time to send in the troops. Send in the troops was the headline.
Right.
And basically all hell broke loose. About 800 staffers signed a letter claiming that this op-ed, this point of view, that federal troops should be brought in to quell violent protests, put the lives of Black New York Times reporters at risk. That was the claim that we later learned was language that was created with the help of the union to focus on an unsafe workplace so that the people who signed the letter wouldn't get in trouble. This sort of came out in later reporting.
Well, there is echoes of the piece that I wrote that Newsweek ran today, which was, I don't know if we left it in there, but it's like, if you tell someone you feel unsafe, like, how do you argue with someone that says that to you without sounding like a dick, right? So, if people know that, it's like, well, I'm unsafe, then it's like this shield that then becomes a weapon that they can use. And I mean, I don't even think it was just, I think there was a walkout at the Times, if I recall.
There was a walkout, yeah. Not by, I don't think it was by reporters or editors, but by ancillary staff mostly.
Okay. So you have to think, here's the thing. You are an opinion editor. I write opinion pieces sometimes. They're called opinion pieces, right? And these are people's opinions. It doesn't mean it's edict. It doesn't mean that we're trying to pass some law now. It's just like, here's a point of view. Now, Tom Cotton, I can't think of one thing to particularly like about Tom Cotton myself. I'm not a Tom Cotton fan, but he is a senator, right? Senator, yes.
He's a senator, and he did sign on to Mitt Romney's minimum wage increase bill. So he's sort of representing that Trumpian populist economic point of view that may or may not have legs in the Republican Party. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that was something he did that I thought was cool. But I agree with you. He's overall, he's terrible. I thought sending in the troops was a terrible idea. But I think the idea that it put the lives, it's like you said, it's not just that how can you argue against someone saying this puts me at risk? Someone who says this puts me at risk as a person of color. It is so hard to stand up to that because
right.
Because we live in America, and America is not a completely equal country. There is still racial inequality. And so when people call upon that, you have to be a monster not to feel some sort of respect towards it and feel a little bit like, oh my God, that's the last thing I want to do. So it gives it this added valence where it makes it even harder to say, wait a minute, is that really true? That this op-ed is putting people's lives at risk?
Well, it's sort of like with the Donald McNeil thing, we'll get to that. But, people were saying, I need, and it wasn't just people of color. It was people, the more activist contingent. I need an apology, from a personal apology to me, New York Times reporter in 2021 for something he said in context in 2019 to someone else. And it's like, well, I'm sorry. What this does is it cheapens people that are really having situations that are really dangerous, right? That are actually dangerous. It's sort of like when anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, I think it's really true. And I think at some point when I was reporting on this for my book, somebody told me that Tom Friedman at some point said, there was a long time where I was the only Jew in, I think it was Lebanon, reporting from Lebanon. At no point was I anything the New York Times prints is putting my life at risk. I'm a reporter. My job is to sometimes,
That's right. So that's an interesting data. First of all, you should tell people where you're from, because originally, where did you grow up?
Well, I'm originally from Boston, but I did grow up in Israel.
Okay.
Came back to go to college. But so let's finish the Tom Cotton, and then we'll move on to the McNeil. So the point I just wanted to make, because this is going to echo again in the McNeil story, is that the Times then misreported the story of what happened at the Times in the Times' own article about what had happened. And that was what really, I think, the real danger here. It's not just that. So Cotton writes this op-ed. 800 people sign a letter saying that it puts the lives of Black New York Times staffers at risk. That phrase, this op-ed puts the lives of Black New York Times reporters at risk is repeated over and over and over on Twitter by some of the biggest reporters at the Times, and like just literally repeating the same phrase over and over. And by the end, James Bennett was sort of forced out, and he was the op-ed page editor. But in the Times' own report about it, they ran an article by their media reporter, and he had two other reporters on him, and they misreported what had happened.
Who was it? Not Ben Smith. Was it Ben Smith?
No, it was Mark Tracy
so.
And two other people who were very heavily involved in the union. And they reported that the person who had overseen the article was the most junior staffer,
Adam
Rubenstein.
Right.
At New York Times Opinion, the most junior editor.
Right.
When the entire, there were at least 3 senior editors above him who had helped edit the piece. And the Times allowed this myth to be perpetuated in an attempt to appease the mob.
Right.
And that was where the first time you saw it moving, like bleeding out from a despicable handling of personnel issues, a despicable cowardice on the part of the people at the top of the food chain at the Times. It bled out into the actual reporting. And that's what you wrote about today in your Donald McNeil piece.
Yes. So, and just to put a button on this, so what happened? James Bennett, who was the opinion page editor, who, people had kind of in the building, more, activist or progressive elements, whatever, were not particularly happy with him because they felt he wasn't like on the super liberal progressive team. Barry Weiss, who, full disclosure, is a dear friend of mine. I love her dearly. Things had been made uncomfortable for her for a while because she had, she'd come from the Wall Street Journal. So, axiomatically, you're going to be a conservative, which she's
I think
not at all.
It was even more than that. It was that the two of them, Bennett and Barry, were in charge of bringing in op-eds by people who would not naturally think of the Times as a home for their op-eds. They were specifically in charge of trying to keep the Times from becoming part of the resistance. And so all of the emotions from people who want the Times to be the resistance sort of landed on the two of them.
So let's ask just let's boil this down to something. So let's say you go to a party or you're listening to a bunch of music. Do you want all the songs to be the same? Is that going to be dynamic? Is that going to make the party better if everybody there has sort of the same, we all believe this, we talk about the same thing? Or should you, as in the words of my friend Matt Welch, who built this beautiful studio here with me, should you be around the unlike-minded weirdos? Personally, I want to be around the unlike-minded weirdos. And I want to hear from people. I don't like Tom Cotton. I don't really like anything about the guy. But you know what? He's got as much right to speak as I do. And I don't find someone having an opinion particularly dangerous. And if I do, I'd rather hear it than not hear it, right? I'd rather there is a place for it. And the New York Times, for, since 1868 or whenever they started, has been a place that I have found as a New York girl to be curious about the world, curious about their fellow Americans, curious about things that they don't understand. And let me hold your hand, reader, and bring you someplace. And then I'm going to use my trusted eyes as a Times reporter to bring you this story. I think that they have obviated that. I think at this point, they have told us, they came out with, was it, a mission statement last week, a new mission statement, where basically they have a mandate, and a mandate is not about curiosity, and a mandate is not about covering their fellow Americans and people in the world. It is about creating, what were the 3 words? Equity, inclusion, and something else.
Diversity, anti-racism.
Yeah, and it's you can, if you want to do that, that's fine, but that's now the topmost layer of what's going to drive what's written at the Times. And then another thing we were talking about last night, it's if you are a journalist, okay, I'm a journalist, I've interviewed serial killers, I'm sure you've been in dangerous situations.
Wow.
Whoa.
I want to hear about
John Wayne Gacy. The absolute privilege of a journalist is to be able to walk into situations that you don't know what the hell is going on. Who are the people that are going to be at this bar or at this fire or at this riot? And you get to walk in and try to understand it and bring it to people. I frankly, I actually really can't think of a time I've been afraid in a situation because I'm just so engaged with what's going on. If you're a journalist at the Times and says, oh, well, I I feel pain from that. I feel in danger from that. I can't have these people talking here. Well, how do I trust you to go out and report a story? Because you're going to say, I'm sorry, Batya, editor, but I can't do it. I'm too scared to do that. I mean, if all your journalists are too scared or feel like in too much pain to cover stuff, you've got to go get another job, man. I'm sorry. This is not the job for you. You've got to have some curiosity and you've got to have some courage and not constantly be looking for reasons to feel in pain.
Yeah, and I think that yes, to all of that, totally co-sign that. When I saw this happening on Twitter, I remember my first thought was, there's a witch hunt for opinion editors who believe that, a democracy relies on left and right reading each other's op-eds. In this case, there's a witch hunt out for people who believe that, and I am a witch. Like you just felt like they're coming. You know what I mean? Of course, I've been canceled in small ways over the years.
Yeah.
You've been canceled in bigger ways. Yeah. But it was terrifying. But I think even worse than that is, if you look at where this country is going, like the true apartheid in this country, it's not racial, it's class.
Sure.
And
course.
the liberals are now completely identified with this sort of like college educated, and not everyone's elite, but a kind of elite culture. And the Republicans are increasingly identified with not just the white working class, but as we saw in the last election, like the working class of all races. And when
that's right.
And when the Times says, Tom Cotton is beyond the pale, who wrote an op-ed that reflected the view of 60% of Americans, they were polled the week before he ran that op-ed, 60% of Americans wanted the government to send in the troops, including 40% of Black Americans.
Yeah.
When you say that these people, you deplatform them, when you deplatform conservatives, you are deplatforming the working class to a large degree, because the working class tends to be more conservative for a host of reasons. And that is the thing, that the hidden class story here, which is that this is not about deplatforming Republicans. It's about deplatforming an entire working class. I think that is disastrous for our democracy.
I'm trying to read. I can put this. I said is so bad. Is there anything we need to know here? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you, Matt Welch. And I'm so sorry. I see people are typing us. I just trying to figure out all the gizmos. I can't also answer
questions. Which used to be.
That's
so true, Chief Jawali. So true.
But we're super glad that you're here. And again, go ahead and subscribe. So let's jump a little bit forward. So yes, we had Tom Cotton, we had James Bennett, we had Rubenstein, who he was like the fall guy, right? He was the fall guy for the Tom Cotton thing, right? And no, I mean, how cowardly is that to say, well, I don't know, just throw him on the fire. Okay, whatever, just like get rid of him and like maybe it's going to be okay. Like it would be okay. Like that would appease people. All right, so now we're going to move for, well, what else have we had? We've had the pile-on, which don't get me started, on about caliphate. We had Andy Mills. Right. That's another story we'll be talking about another time, really unpacking. And then we had what happened with Donald McNeil. And the past 3 podcasts, Matt and I have talked about this. So if you're here, you've probably heard about this. But the little nickel version is, started as a copy boy at the New York Times in 1976, worked up, did a lot of different gigs, became a science reporter, has done like incredible work all over the world in terms of like AIDS and Zika, and like really has won a gazillion prizes for like really helping people that are in serious pain and dying. Like from 60 countries he's reported from.
People in danger.
People in actual danger. He was the lead COVID reporter, of course, the past year. He's just been exploded everywhere. He's been, interviewing Fauci. He's been on the Daily, and he's been sort of great on the Daily because he's just like sort of conversational, even though he's a bit of a grumpus. Apparently, someone described him as a porcupine. Okay, that's fine. He's an old guy. He just turned 67. They were putting him up for a Pulitzer, which would have been a super nice like capstone to a 45-year career. But oh no, wait. When he was an expert guide on a time-sponsored trip in Peru for high school students who's paid, or their families paid $5,500 a head for them to go on.
Not including airfare.
And as he put in his Medium essays, and I in the explainer here, it wouldn't let me put links, but I put some of the articles we're talking about. So you can go over to medium.com and look up Donald McNeil Jr. and you can find what he published yesterday.
Or go to Newsweek and find Nancy's wonderful.
That's right. You can, and you probably linked his stuff there. You probably added some links to it. So, he explained he was paid $300 a day and was not allowed to drink. He kept saying, and I was not allowed to have a drink. God damn it, I'm hanging out with 15-year-olds.
15-year-olds from Andover
Yeah,
without
yeah.
a drink. Like, it's literally a Chinese home
What are you
fortune.
doing? So he had done the same trip in 2018 and everything had been like pretty cool. Like, yeah, he's an old dude, but he's like a smart dude. And like, I don't know if you remember being a teenager, like you want to like test out your ideas and like, yeah, I want to talk to the expert and like see how I fly. You probably don't fly too well, but that's fine, right? It was friendly. He liked it. He did it again the next year. Well, by 2019, the ideologies of, can't say this, everything's, systemic racism and all that, the stuff that you kind of hear, like we're supposed to blame every problem on, were really super, super entrenched. And these kids got very, very aggravated with the fact that he was not, I guess, of their thinking. And he got in a conversation with someone where someone said, so listen, I don't know if it's at their school, but at a school, a 12-year-old girl, a Jewish girl and her black friend were like sitting around, goofing around and saying something. And I guess the Jewish girl was like, oh, you like N-word something. I don't remember exactly what it was. And then the black girl was like, oh, you Jew something, whatever, like goofing off. Well, I don't know if both of them got suspended, but.
Oh, no, Nancy.
Oh, no. Is that disingenuous of
only
me?
One of them got suspended.
Right. So
no, not at all. I'm just saying it. So the Jewish girl said the N-word. The black girl called her a cheap Jew or a slur. And that's a very crucial part of the story is like only one of them, of course, was suspended for it. And go on. Yeah.
So she was suspended. And they're in Peru and this 15 or 17-year-old, I don't really know, asked McNeil, do you think she should have been suspended? And he said he didn't know the context exactly. And he's like, well, did he call her the N-word or was she like using it like from a rap song or a book? And when asking that question, he used the word. Okay, post-trip, some kids are peeved about this, kind of peeved, I guess, that he was cranky too or whatever. And they complained. And of course, they're 15, so they boil everything down to like, he said there's no such thing as, white privileged or something, which he hadn't. But anyway, they complain. Times takes it up, 2019. They call him in. He explains everything that happens. They kind of close the book. They discipline him or they put like a disciplinary letter in his file. I mean, the guy's been there 45 years as of now, right? And he goes on. And 2020 is amazing. I mean, it's terrible in terms of COVID, but it's amazing for him because he's doing this incredible reporting. So they put him up for Pulitzer, or they're going to. Well, in January of this year, a year and a half after the trip, someone at the New York Times, and we don't know who, nor does McNeil, leaks that there had been an investigation about the N-word and various things to the Daily Beast. Now, the Daily Beast reporters have been, I got a little, we did a, I keep wanting to call Clubhouse Backspace, but we did a little Clubhouse last night talking about this. And Ben Smith, who I really admire a lot, he's the media reporter for the Times. I think he's very fair. I think he's very smart. We've been saying something like, why are these Daily Beast guys like being the errand boys for the Times? Because they are it's the same two dudes that keep like writing about Barry Weiss and James Bennett and Caliphate and Andy Mills. And now it's like they've got like a direct line from the Times. Someone at the Times or a few people at the Times are feeding them this. But Ben Smith had a very good point, and I thanked him for it. He's like, look, these are scoops. You might not think it's the kind of journalism you practice or this or that, but it is a scoop. Someone gives it to you and you follow it. Well, okay. I can go with that, but it seems to me, and I'd like your opinion on this, that there always seems to be a mission behind the scoop. Like if I write you a story about some egg rolls down the street, like we're in Chinatown right now, by the way, it might be because I think they're super great and like maybe you want to go and eat some egg rolls, but it's not like my mission to get you there. The mission seemed to be, including with the McNeil story, was to take this guy down with very sort of amorphous leading headlines like star reporter of the New York Times accused of using N-word racial slurs. But they don't tell you the context. I don't think they knew the context. They just wanted you to start just banging that drum a little bit. Like, here's who this guy is. And of course it catches fire. So anyway, now I've lost my train of thought. I'm going to
Well,
Pass
so
it over to you.
Let me just cap off the story. And so you'll see the echoes with the Cotton op-ed. So after the Daily Beast, so he comes back from Peru. He's disciplined, as Nancy says. Dean Baquet later says, Dean Baquet, the executive editor of the New York Times, later says, I actually thought I was going to fire him when I heard just the outline of the story. But when I heard the details, I realized, oh, it's really not that bad. And we just explained, you can't use the N-word.
He said it wasn't malicious.
It wasn't malicious or hateful.
Right.
That was it. So, and everything goes back to normal. Donald McNeil reports on COVID. Everything's going fine. And then the Daily Beast piece comes out.
Right.
And you made the point in both of your pieces that the Daily Beast came out, meaning the leak to the Daily Beast happened right after McNeil had done this very big.
He'd had a big week.
He had a big week. He had interviewed Dr. Fauci for the Daily, which is the New York Times is one of their most successful properties.
One of the most successful podcasts in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And someone said to me, like, well, he was such a successful guy. Like, why go after him? Well, that's who you want to go after, Joe Schmo? Like, who cares if you knock down Joe Schmo, right? So the Daily Beast article comes out, and that was on the 28th of January. By the way, they contacted McNeil at 11:17 a.m. and said, here's what we're going to press with, not in details, but we have a 3 p.m. deadline to hear from you. Cheers. And meanwhile,
baby journos who are listening to this, that's not journalism.
Don't do that.
Like, that's not how you
don't do that.
You don't give someone 4 hours to respond to something that is going to potentially ruin their lives.
And he, as McNeil said in his meeting, he explained, he's like, I didn't even see it. I was writing a COVID story. I was writing a story about, we have 500,000 people that are dead. Okay. I was writing a story about this, and I was getting 500 emails a day. And frankly, he didn't see it, but his editor did. And she knew. She could smell, because now this is what happens, as I put in the thing. It's a blood sport at times. This happens now. It happened a couple times last year. It happened with Andy Mills. This is the thing. He was the next one that was going to be thrown.
Right.
On
so
fire.
The Daily Beast piece comes out, and then 150 New York Times staffers sign a letter claiming that they require a personal apology from Donald McNeil. They need something to happen
and reinvestigate it.
And at that point,
we know what double jeopardy is, right? If you're found innocent, which he was internally at the New York Times, you can't retry someone that's been found innocent, except you can at the New York Times. And why? Because the rules of the game have changed. We've got new referees here in the arena, and they want something done. They want a personal apology, and they want him reinvestigated. Well, the writing's on the wall for McNeil.
Especially once that letter, of course, leaks as well.
And then what does Dean Baquet do? Dean Baquet, who is the executive editor at the New York Times, so kind of like the boss, right? Who has already told the Daily Beast, you know what? We investigated it. Yes, it was bad, poor judgment, not malicious, put to bed. Gets the letter and says, you know what? There's it is not, I can't remember. I should remember the verbiage. I've quoted it in 50,000 articles at this point, but like, intention doesn't matter. This word is not allowable under any circumstance. Intent doesn't matter.
Now, I have to say, like, I actually personally agree with that. I don't think that word should ever come out of the mouth of a white person. Like, we can agree with that view of things and still think that what happened next was totally wrong.
Sure, I'm down with that.
Yeah, like I agree that when it comes to the N-word, like no white people should ever say it ever.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, I don't think I've really said it. I haven't had the desire to. But I also don't, as I put in another piece I wrote about this for the Dispatch, it's like, if you take it upon yourself to turn words into pellets of plutonium, right, that are then going to be used against your enemies, it's like, okay, so it's a word today, it's an idea tomorrow, it's a person the next time. I just don't think that I can do that. I'm not going to accept that. I don't particularly want to, but I also think that we have to look at context. We have to look at intent.
I totally agree. Like if McNeil had called someone the N-word,
right? That's a different story.
I totally agree that there is a difference between like mentioning the N-word and using the N-word as a slur. I totally agree. Yeah. But I think it's totally fine. And in fact, I would I would be on board with companies saying, we accept that there is that difference from the point of view of policy, like it doesn't exist.
And a company has the right to do that.
The problem is that that's not what happened here. Like what happened here was that the Times decided that what he had done was not hateful, not malicious, not a fireable offense, and then reversed course at the behest of this letter from 150 angry staffers.
Right. So they basically
pushed him out,
caved. And in McNeil's explainer, he was talking about how Batya, again, executive editor of the New York Times, used to be the LA Times, kept saying, "You've lost the newsroom, Donald.
Yeah.
Donald, you've lost the newsroom." And it's
like he was some sort of freaking politician.
Right. He was like what, the
you're
janitor?
The leader of the newsroom.
You're the guy. You're the guy that
you're the executive editor of the newsroom. You tell the newsroom what to think. Like Donald, like a reporter's job is not to get it's not a popularity contest to keep the newsroom. That it was so sick. But so here's the thing, and this is where I take issue with Ben Smith. The reason we know that is what Dean Batya said, allegedly, is because as of March 1st, Donald McNeil is no longer employed by the. I mean, he was let go earlier.
I think it was March
2nd.
No, not March 1st. Yeah, exactly. He was 28th. The thing started by February 5th. He was out.
By February 5th, he was out. Now, on February 14th, the New York Times ran an article about this.
Right.
And they did again what they had done with the Cotton op-ed. Now, Donald McNeil told the author of that article, Ben Smith, the media columnist, that he could not give an interview until March 1st because I think he was still on the payroll.
Yes, he was.
And he had retained counsel, and his lawyer had said to him, you are not to speak about this until you are no longer employed there officially. And I think the employment lasted through the month.
Yesterday was the first day he could release it.
Speak about it.
Release he did.
Release he did. He wrote a 4-part
25,000
word piece. We read it. We were outraged. Yeah. Go read it. It's blood-curdling.
It's interesting.
The thing is, the Times, knowing all of this backstory, knowing everything that actually happened on that trip, allowed their media reporter to report out an article in which he interviewed a few of the students who gave their version of what happened, who was told by the subject of the article, I can talk to you in 2 weeks. And instead of saying, I'll probably get this wrong if I don't hear from him, he ran the piece, insisted on running it on February 14th, and was edited by Carolyn Murphy, who was in the room with Donald McNeil when all of this was going down, who was CC'd on all the emails of his explanations, none of which were reflected in that New York Times report. And so once again, the New York Times allowed this mismanagement to seep out into the reporting and report falsely on what happened, giving these 17-year-old Andover students their say, which was, it's so clear. I promise you, if you read that New York Times article and you go and read Donald McNeil's version, you see exactly, of course, this is how it seemed to 17-year-olds.
Because they don't know
anything. They're supposed to be wrong about everything. And it's
that's right. But that's something that we wrote today. I don't know if it wound up staying in the piece. It's like, you know what? 17-year-olds, this is exactly when you should be making a billion mistakes and sounding like an idiot because you're trying so many things. Right? I still sound like an idiot, and that's fine. I don't, make a mistake. You try to do better. But they were like, you know everything when you're 17, right? But even McNeil in his piece was like, I don't bear ill will toward these kids at all. Like, I actually got super choked up toward the end of his piece. I could even get choked up again when he's like, it's talking to this one girl, Sophie, who Ben Smith included by her name. I had to talk about this on the air recently. It's like, well, should she have been able to do that? She's over 18, but maybe, she's going to get doxxed and people send her hate mail. And I'm like, hey, you know what? She made a decision to do it. She's over 18. She can do it. But even McNeil, with everything that happened, was like, I wish that she hadn't. Well, first of all, she reminded me of my daughter at that age, number one. Number two, I wish she hadn't, because I know what it's like to be through this, and I would not want her to go through that.
And he didn't blame her. He kept saying, it's like so not her fault. And he was exactly right. It was the fault of the adults in the room who did not protect her from her own.
And it was the thing is that you expect teenagers to act like teenagers, and especially if you're a 67-year-old dude. Like, of course, you've had teenagers. You know what they think that they're capable of, and they're not, and whatever. And they're going to be swayed by this or that ideology. And next year it's going to be something else. But the problem, and we capped off our piece today that I ran, which was, you know what? You can forgive teenagers for doing this, but you can't forgive adults for
Acting
using
like
these
teenagers.
for acting like teenagers, and also
Go read Nancy's piece. It's so good.
yeah, but also weaponizing. I mean, weaponizing for I've said this now a billion times. I see it as ambition, and I see it as it's working. It's like, well, you know what? I can get rid of this person. And I'm not saying that it's even like I want to get rid of this person, but it's just like, wow, it's almost like a board game. Like, well, now our team moves a little ahead on the board, right? It's like, okay, so now you've gotten rid of a guy that was up for a Pulitzer for writing about like COVID and AIDS and Zika. So do you have the courage to go to 60 countries and report on this stuff? Because I don't think you do. I don't think you do if you're telling me that you need someone drummed out of the New York fucking Times because he said something in context a year and a half ago. I just don't see you having the courage.
And I think, again, there's a sort of a class angle to this, which is that McNeil, who had sort of worked his way up from being a copy boy.
Though admitted there was some nepotism there, like he knew someone that knew someone at the Times, which is
right.
Okay, it's how people get jobs, right? That's
and
the way the world works.
But he did apply to be a reporter.
And didn't get it.
They said he was not good enough,
Yeah.
but he could be a copy boy. And so he started out as a copy boy, worked his way up, odd jobs, and then finally became a reporter. That model of journalism is gone.
Yeah.
Now the way you become a journalist is you go to Andover, you go on one of these New York Times $5,000 trips to, Peru, not including airfare. You then go to where is she, Harvard or wherever,
Yeah.
and then you move to New York City and you get a job that pays $35,000 a year, and your parents buy you an apartment. Like, that's the only way to become a journalist today. And so the model of journalism he represents, which is you start out from this kind of working class position and you work your way up through experience, it's gone. And now, like, the remnants are being replaced and booted out by this sort of toxic mix of like extreme youth culture privilege coupled with woke culture, which is, to my mind, just another way of perpetuating class inequality through the smokescreen, as though, you act like inequality is about race. You never have to talk about class. So, like, it was very much about, who here has the power, and it's this kid from Andover who has been empowered to make the moral decisions of the New York Times newsroom,
and they cave. I mean, this is what is so incredibly, I'm sorry, I guess it's a little bit of a strong word to say shameful, but it is. It's like, how do you cave to this? I understand it's scary. It's scary to have 150 people, yelling at you. Believe me, I've been there, It's scary, but you have to just like stand your ground as best you can. I mean, Batya, backed up. It was actually Sulzberger, the publisher, who initially backed up Bennett and said, hey, we're going to publish a variety of opinions. And then the 800 people, it's like, oh, no, we're not. Okay. And then you have Batya saying, oh, we're going to, we're behind Donald McNeil and this and that. And like, oh, no, we're not. Wow, guys. So my last question here, and maybe we'll wrap it up because I forgot to put the chicken in the oven. We're going to have dinner. What happens to the New York Times? And one thing before we get there, because I'm actually super curious about this. So I said when all this happened with McNeil, I was like, this is the bridge too far. This is the one. This is the one. Like, everybody else is like, oh, God, and Trump was still in office. Oh, we still have to be all hysterical. We don't know what's going on. We're divided. Well, we were in a new day now. COVID's ending. Biden's president. What happens to the New York Times when we have peeled back the curtain? Look at that. And we've seen pretty baldly what's going on. We've seen what leadership is willing to do. They just put out this mission statement that you can go see, which is sort of like, which requires employees seem to want a lot of hand holding. They don't want to just like have their editor say like, good job, bad job, do something else. They want someone to like walk them through, like you walk your child into kindergarten and stay for the first day on a little chair. It's like, I don't get that. Like, I don't want that. I want you to kick my ass so I can do good work for you, or maybe not kick it too hard, but what happens now to the New York Times? Do they keep caving to this, or is there going to be a pushback? What do you think?
So it seems really clear that the financial model that A.G. Sulzberger sort of rode into publisherhood on the Times
And when was
Innovation
that?
Report. I think it was in 2014, 2015.
Okay.
The financial model is very much based on perpetuating a moral panic for affluent liberal whites. There's so many levels in which it's deeply embedded. So, for example, I'll give you an example. The Times has this thing called Project Feels. Have you heard of this?
What? Feels?
Project Feels. Yeah, it's
like
terrible.
Feels?
Brace yourself.
Oh, God.
So in 2018, they started asking, the right readers, so millennials who make north of $100,000 a year, to rate how articles made them feel. And then when they had 100,000 data points, they took this information and they built an AI machine that could took the information and could predict how an article would make a reader feel. And they boiled it down to 18 emotions, and they now sell these to advertisers. They say, what do you want your reader to be feeling when they read your article? And of course, the more you feel, the more likely you are to click. That's another thing that they found. The longer you are, the more likely you are to stay on page, the longer you stay on page, and the more likely you are to click on an ad. So essentially, they became Facebook. That's what Facebook does, right? That's how it makes its money.
Okay.
And so the Times sort of just replaced Facebook. Facebook has been a real problem for publishers because it keeps changing the algorithm. People get upset, and that screws over publishers. I can tell you, like every publication I've worked at, it's like there's that moment where Facebook changes the algorithm, and everyone goes into war mode. So the Times was like, we don't need you anymore. We'll do our own Project Feels, and they now they have created millions and millions and millions of campaigns, earned millions and millions and millions of dollars. This explains why Trump's name appears every 250 words in the Times on average, as Musa Al-Gharbi, a sociologist who counts this, found out. Because what better guaranteed way to get your reader on the Upper East Side to feel than to put in the word Trump? And so Trump is now all over the style section. He's all over the cooking section. I mean, anywhere you can get it, just go.
Someone said that to me. We were talking on Backspace Clubhouse last night, and I said something, because Trump's not really in the news, and they're like, oh, you could have fooled me. I read the New York Times today. Exactly. I thought it was March 2020, not March 2021, but that's because it's outrage calories, right? You need the feels. I was under the impression. I mean, I have nothing wrong with when I read an incredible article, like there was one a couple of weeks ago in the opinion section about how people with memory loss and Alzheimer's, older people are so isolated, horrifying by COVID. I mean, it was a crushing piece. I urge you to go read it because, God damn it, the Times still does some incredible reporting, right? Yeah. But I would not give up thinking for feeling. I want a piece also to make me think. Like, I'm not there, right? I'm not there to me. I got a lot of people that can make me feel things. I felt a lot of things today. I would like what I read to be edifying in some way. Intellectually, however, not just emotionally. So
yeah, I mean, I think that what's really funny is that at the times that the time that the New York Times started, in the 1840s, this new kind of journalism had just started called the penny press. So up until then, newspapers had cost 6 cents a day, but you couldn't even buy them by the day. You had to buy a subscription, which cost $10 a year, which was way out. Like a farmer made $5 a month. Yeah. So they were basically for economic and political elites, people who really needed this information. And this guy, Benjamin Day, woke up one day and was like, wait a minute, by Scott, there's so many poor people. Like if I just charge a penny, what's a penny? A penny is like how much you pay for an apple.
Or a candle.
Right? Exactly. Or a skein of thread. I could make a newspaper that would be so interesting that a poor person would give up their apple, their daily snack for it, as long as it's interesting enough. And so they started this populist press, and it really took off. I mean, he was instantly successful, instantly totally copied over and over. And at the same time, the New York Times woke up and was like, we can't compete for numbers, but what we can do is we can convince advertisers that our readers are rich. And that way, they'll pay more for the ads because they know they're not wasting their money advertising to someone who can't afford their product. So that was sort of the Times' model. It was a counter-revolution to the penny press and to the popular press. And it also succeeded because there were a lot of aspirational, rising people who were sort of part of these more economic and political, not elites, but they were aspired to be. And he also only charged a penny, Henry Raymond. And when he died, and it was taken over by his friend, and then, Adolph Oakes bought it. Oakes, exactly. I keep calling him Oakes, I don't know why. In 1896.
Could be Oakes.
Oakes. And he really leaned into this. He was like, this is how you make money. Like, you can't compete with the penny press for the masses. Forget about them. What you can do is you can make more money showing advertisers that you are excluding the masses. And to do that, you have to, and the way you do that is through the tone. So the penny press is to show the poor and the working class that they were for them. They were sensationalists. They covered what was local news for the poor. They covered crime. Because if you're poor, that's your local news,
Crime, sports. Right.
Murder, adultery,
right.
But also just like the daily life of the poor and the working classes. And what the Times did to signal their exclusion was it took this very staid tone. It wanted to not soil the morning breakfast linen. That was like one of the, exactly.
Yeah.
So because it was appealing to an affluent set, it sort of wanted to lower the temperature of the emotions because that was considered uncouth at the time.
Right.
And what you have today is the New York Times leaning into sensationalism, not because it's no longer for the affluent, it's still for the affluent. It's that the affluent now want that.
That's their hit.
It's
interesting. So I've read the Times forever. I used to subscribe. I lived in LA. And hello, we're going to stop the allow, whatever that is. Hi, sorry, I'm doing something techie here. Really techie, clicking the button. But I remember there used to be in the magazine kind of a style section was fashion. And, it's like fancy stuff. I stopped subscribing to the New York Times Sunday paper when every single dress was 4 figures or higher.
So, but that's the thing is you still have every dress is 4 figures or higher, but on the cover is Angela Davis or a Black Lives Matter actress.
Don't get me started
and
on
that's
her.
the proof that it's that this woke culture is a smokescreen for class inequality. Because you open the New York Times, go like this, and T Magazine has Angela Davis on the front and a Cartier watch on the back. Like that is the New York Times today. So when you say, like, are you hopeful? I mean, I still subscribe. I still read it every day. But I don't know where it's going. Where do you think it's going?
Well, I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, I have to say, it's given me a lot of work this month because of what they're doing. So yeah, keep it up, New York Times. Well, I think that, again, if they pulled back the curtain a little here, I thought, and with a lot of people have been writing stuff about this that has been not too positive and not just like Joe Schmo, like interesting, smart people. I thought, well, maybe they'll think a little bit, like we've got to pivot a little bit, but I don't think so. I think they're going to dig in.
Yeah.
I think they're going to commit. And they don't run on an advertising model anymore because advertising's in the toilet, right? Everybody advertises online because it's cheaper. They run on a subscription model. So I've said this before, do they lose subscriptions because they can't drum up the same like anger that Trump, instilled in people? So like, you had to get your hit from the Times every day. What's Trump doing today? Like, let's extend whatever story it is, Stormy Daniels or Russiagate or whatever. So if they lose a little of that, which I think they will, and then they're just going to lose a few people like me that I'm not buying the newspaper anymore. I have it online. I have to. I'm a journalist. I can report it, but I'm not going to pay for a paper anymore. Can they replace the people that they might lose? They might bleed off because maybe the coverage starts getting a little less interesting. We already know it's pretty woke at this point, but maybe they really stop. Like I said this in something recently, if I can't trust you to report on Portland, which I saw with my own eyeballs, I had Antifa tell me, oh yeah, we're burning this shit down. But I've got the New York Times over here going like, oh, no. Like if I can't trust you on that, how do I trust you on Iraq?
No,
I don't know how to do that. So if you bleed off subscribers, and subscribers are who are keeping you in business now, the Cartier watch is not keeping you in business anymore. If you bleed off subscribers, and then you lose money because you just don't have the same, whatever it was, 7 million subscribers or whatever it is that you had, you have to make some changes, right? Well, what happens when you start to have to lay people off in the newsroom? They're not going to be too happy. And they're going to find a reason why you're causing them pain and why it's illegitimate for you to cause them pain. I don't know. The Times might be walking into something that's just narrower and narrower, the narrower and narrower things that you're allowed to say, the things you're allowed to think, things that you're allowed to cover, things that your reporters are willing to cover. And then as I put in the piece today, I think I cut this out before I sent it to you, but it's like, if you know how to sharpen knives, like that's your job all day, I sharpen knives. Well, you want to use your knives, right? And if that's what you know how to do, you're a knife sharpener and you know how to use your knife. Well, you get rid of like the people that you didn't like, a Donald McNeil, a Barry Weiss. But what do you know how to do? You know how to use your knife. They will turn on each other. That's what I think is going to happen. If the New York Times does not decide to again be a broader, richer, more curious paper, I think that they destroy themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
It's funny because I really struggle to. I at first also had the Trump derangement syndrome, like in the beginning.
Sure, I think a lot of us did. I did.
I just got so sick of being angry at this thing that, like, ultimately, like, really, like, what was the actual, like, measured impact? I'm talking pre-corona. Like, every day you wake up and you're exactly right. You get your serving of, like, he's so crazy. And at some point it's just like, I just got bored of that feeling.
You almost feel manipulated.
Totally feel manipulated.
Right? It's like the rat hitting the
it was
cocaine
exactly.
Or
I'm like,
is,
but
right?
where's I just got bored of feeling that way. And I started just trying to reach out to everybody I knew who had voted for him to try to understand how they saw things out of sheer boredom. Like, it wasn't anything like I wasn't doing my job as a journalist. Like, it wasn't out of some like high moral thing. It was just the boredom of feeling so angry all the time.
Of hearing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. I think we are going to call it and have some dinner. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll do it again.
Tweet at us. Let us know if you disagree with anything we said. We want to know. We want to hear from you.
Okay, a couple of things. What's your Twitter handle?
It's at Ungar-Sargon.
Yeah, you know how to spell that. I have it in here. I'm at Nancy Rom. Please, again, subscribe to this podcast, which we'll be doing like once a week. Get some different people in here. And we really thank you for joining us. Okay, bye. Which always takes me like 14 times to actually.
Wait, let me take a picture of us before we get out of our gear.